So in our prior video on the windows, we talked a little bit about the variables and how the variables applied to any of the repayment comparisons or strategies that you might be modeling. It keeps them consistent. So if I model 30 years, it's going to model 30 for everything, or 6% savings rate, 6% for everything. Now you'll notice here I've got it set to 30 years and 6% as our default variable, after tax and normal. So this is just looking at an after-tax normal payment reschedule for this client, and they're going to be debt-free in 29 years, 6 months at a cost of about $536,540. Now remember from the prior video, if I change this from normal to say biweekly, what's happening is it's applying a specific strategy to this loan, and this is going to be reflected in the repayment amortization tables and the repayment tables associated with this particular plan. And now you're going to see that if I just go from my normal mortgage to a biweekly, it'll cost me $497,504 to pay off this debt. And I can see this is going to be paying off much sooner than 30 years and 24 years, 0 months to be exact. If I switch from a biweekly to a snowball, again, this is a strategy. And the strategy itself is explained in the notes as well as some of the other videos we've done. But what I want to show here is that it's going to recalculate the current liabilities repayment strategy based on the snowball lowest balance first, paying off in 18 years, 1 month. Highest interest first, are we going to pick up anything there? 18 years, 1 month. Will that pay it off faster? Maybe a little bit. Nope, pretty much the same. And I can see the cost of paying off that debt is $342,975. So there's going to be a significant reduction in the cost of that debt in these different scenarios. What I want to point out here is that these strategies are independent of the save, spend, repay box below. So in other words, I can apply save, spend, or repay strategies to a biweekly or a snowball or anything else. So if I were to go through and apply, for example, an extra $100 a month, it's still going to assume that I'm going to use a snowball highest interest first strategy. It's just going to give me an extra $100 a month to work with. So to make that clear, let's just go back to a normal payment here. And this will take us back to the normal from before. And one of the things that I want you to notice is before we did not have the save, spend, repay expanded. So when I collapse that, all of these calculations aren't a part of this chart. Everything is WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. So in this particular situation, it's 29 years, 6 months for this client to be debt-free. If I expand the Save, Spend, Repay Plan button and it gives me those extra controls, it's going to immediately apply any of those fields towards the current liabilities. In this case, we have an extra $100 a month, and that's being saved. So the green box here corresponds to the green growth here. And notice it's going up. Why is it compounding and going up? Because any savings that's available from this monthly $100 a month is growing at 6%. If I change that from 6% to 3%, it's going to do it for all of the plans so that we're comparing apples to apples. But you'll notice that this green line of growth is not going to be nearly as steep because now our $100 a month is growing at a much slower pace. You'll also notice it was going to be debt-free in 24 years. Now it's 26 years. So that lower growth rate on the savings of 3% means that our green line grows slower, and the mortgage itself is not going to be paid off for 30 years on a normal repayment schedule because it's a 30-year note. And they have 26 years plus to go. But I can see that with that savings, I'm going to be able to pay it off sooner. In 26 years, 3 months at 3%, and if I take it back to where it was at, say, 6%, then we can see again how as that money grows and compounds faster, that debt could be paid off even faster. Now I can do any combination of cash or cash flow. And we designed this so that if that client had a gift from a parent coming to the closing table of $5,000, I could put that $5,000 in as additional money that was going to be available. And there are 3 things I can do with that money. That $5,000 could be spent, it could be saved, going into a side fund or growth account or investment, or it could be repaid, which would assume that it's being applied directly towards the debt. And you have the total flexibility to do any combination of the above. Let's say that I'm going to spend $2,000 of what comes in from the parent at closing. Maybe it's to buy some furniture. Well, that means I've got $5,000 available, but if I spend $2,000, there's only $3,000 left. And what if I want to go over here and I want to apply $1,000 of that towards my actual mortgage or my liability? You'll notice that it's going to allow me to then split this and have $2,000 going to savings, $1,000 going to repay the debt, and $2,000 being spent. That's all reflected in the chart above. I can see that this assumption here was that there's $5,000 available, $2,000 is going to get spent at closing, $2,000 is going into a savings account, and $1,000 is going to be used to repay the debt. Cash flow. Let's just say that there was $300 a month in cash flow that was available at the closing table. And I don't know where this is coming from because this is the current liabilities right now. We're just looking at their current plan. I could still model $100 a month of that additional. Maybe a grandparent was giving $5,000 to this client to buy a new house, and they're trying to decide whether to apply that $500,000 or that $5,000 plus the $300 a month towards their current liabilities, or should I apply that towards a new proposed liabilities and buy a new house with it. But again, look at the flexibility here. I'm just going to split this up just to show you what you can do with it and what's actually happening, because it's all being modeled on the screen, as well as all the current liability numbers are being recalculated as this happens. Now, there are not as many situations where you would modify current liabilities. In most situations, you're going to have this collapsed, and you're going to simply show the current liabilities as they are today. But I have the ability to say there's 300 available, I'm spending 100. Notice what happens to the orange line now. I'm spending $2,000 at closing, but I'm spending $100 a month over 30 years. So it's showing me my spending and how much I'm getting to spend over that time period. I'm saving $2,000 at closing and $100 a month, and I get to see my growth rate on that money. And I'm repaying $1,000 at closing and an extra $100 a month over time. Again, notice how it's all being calculated and reflected. And my debt-free point now is 21 years, 10 months, and my total expenses over time, $435,598. So tremendous flexibility there. But again, in most situations, you would simply keep this collapsed. And I can go through and model something and then collapse it. It will still remember it, but it won't consider this any part of the current liabilities repayment plan. So now I can go through and compare the current plan here for this client on a normal structure. This is what they're going to do, and then I can compare it to something below. In this case, a proposed liabilities for a 30-year fixed with no debt. So then what it's nice is I'm actually able to see the difference. In this particular proposal, I'm going from $241 in debt to $294. That's freeing up $49,350 in cash at closing. And my payment, which up here was going to be $1,848, here is $1,485. So I'm actually freeing up $363 a month in positive cash flow. I can then come down here and model that because, see, and above, this is my current do nothing scenario. This is my proposed do something scenario, and I can pick any of the options I've modeled. I'll just go with this one. Now, the default is for this to be spent, but I'm assuming that if they're taking $49,350 out, in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to actually assume that they're trying to build up some savings or start to increase their savings for the future. So that $49,350 is going to go into their savings account. They also have $363 a month available, and they can repay that. Again, you could slide across here and split it. Say I want to repay a portion of that. So I'm going to take that $363 a month that's freed up in available cash flow, and I'm going to kind of hedge here. And I'm going to put $200 a month of that towards repaying my current debt, and the balance, that 178 or whatever the number is, that's going to 163 is going to be applied towards my savings. Again, I can see the point here that the debt's paid off is still going to be about 28 years because I've got that $200 a month going towards the debt. But my savings account is growing such that I could actually cross over here in 16 years and 3 months. And notice comparing apples to apples, because all of this money, this cash and cash flow, is coming from the refinance. So it's not like I need to go back and add it in here, because I'm going from 241 to 294. And I'm going from a cost of 4.949 to 3.4. So you can see that that's new money coming in. That creates a savings of 266,469 over time. But if I wanted to go through and model not the 30-year fixed with no debt, I want to compare that over here instead. I want to model the 30-year fixed with debt. I simply click this, and it's going to change everything to that prior scenario, and it's going to color code it to green. It's going to say in that scenario, I'm going from borrowing 241 to 240. So I have actually no cash. I'm having to spend $51.50 at closing, but I have a lot less debt. But my cash flow goes up dramatically now to $583 a month. So this client's very conservative. They want to repay all that cash flow towards their debt. Again, I'm comparing apples to apples here, and I'm showing them they could be debt-free in 22 years, 3 months, taking the cash, the negative cash, and the positive cash flow and apply it in this way. Now, if I slide this over here to savings, I should see the repayment go down because I'm actually earning 6% on my growth rate on my savings. So I should end up growing my savings faster. And we'll watch this recalculate. But you can see it just dropped to 20 years and 6 months, and it remodeled for me. Here's the mortgage going down. Here's my savings going up. When you see a dent like this, when I say a dent, you see how it's going up and it slows? What that means is probably one of these liabilities. See how both of these liabilities paid off in the 6th year? Well, that means I can no longer apply that savings for those 2 liabilities to the current savings. So that's all being reflected here. That savings is really juicing up initially because I paid those debts off, but now those debts are paid off. I can't keep prepaying at this rate, and that's going to show up in your AM tables. It's going to show you how much you have to invest each year on a net basis. But still, even with these debts paid off, that money that's there is going to continue to compound and grow at that 6% rate, and I can see my prepayment date. So incredibly powerful repayment modeling can be done here, and I'm going to be able to incorporate any notes here and make a summary of my recommendation. I'd recommend you go with the more conservative route and use the above modeled new 30-year fixed with no new debt and apply savings toward a savings program at your 6% estimated rate of growth. Now, an important thing to point out here, objective notes, these will print on your report. So this gives you a really nice way to tighten up your report because you're going to have your original objectives and their goals, and then this is going to print right beneath that as you go through and summarize what you're recommending for that client.